I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday and it is Go Week. It is the Tuesday of the first week of the regular season. We are just about 48 hours away from our first game action that counts this season. Dennis, can you feel the excitement?
So I've been pretty excited since Saturday. And, first off, that's when I started feeling better from having COVID. But then I got to see the Buckeyes win 52-6, did not cover the spread. So if you're a betting man, don't bet on your home team like that, man.
Was their spread even larger than 50 points?
52-6. So they won by 50. What was it? 56 or 46, and the spread was 48.5. So
real competitive game.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, like I was talking to Cole and he's like, well, why do the Buckeyes play these teams like that? And I said, because these teams come in and we pay them a whole bunch of money and it supports the athletic department for that school. It's one of the biggest, it's their biggest moneymaker of the entire year. And it's been a tradition for a long time to play these smaller schools in Ohio every year, play one or two of them to help support, lower level, not less important, but lower tiered teams across the state.
Sure. At least they started off better than Florida State.
Yeah.
Not a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I both we got our draft done. You and I are both getting healthier, and actual games are coming back. This is going to be a fun weekend. Thursday night primetime, Friday night primetime just after our show, and then full slate Sunday and Monday. You got to be excited for that.
Very much so. You know what the greatest thing about getting our draft done was? I got to pull out the Dynasty GM, switch it over to contender mode, which is like redraft, and see that our defending champion, my wife, has the lowest ranked team in the league.
Yeah.
So maybe I have a chance to, be head of household this year.
I'd rather win in December than in August when I'm using the draft.
Look, can you stop raining on my parade?
Well, win's a win. There you go. Somebody who will not be available on Thursday night is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was placed on the NFI non-football injury list, which means he'll be out for at least 4 games. They picked up Samaje Perine. I would wager to say Samaje Perine and not Carson Steele is going to be solidly the RB2 on Thursday night. Does that do much for you?
Yeah, I kind of like it for Perine because we want to get to see sort of how does he fit in the Kansas City offense. Carson Steele looked really good in preseason, and it seems like he may be the number 3 there with CEH out. But
he's definitely number 3. There's only 3 backs on the roster.
There's been a lot of talk about CEH being a bell cow, and we've seen the last 2, 3, 4 years with Jerick McKinnon that there's no fear in giving their second running back who is a great pass catcher, plenty of snaps when need be. I think they're going to give Pacheco an opportunity, but I think they also know the way he runs and the physical nature with which he plays, giving him 25 touches a game is only going to last so long before his effectiveness diminishes some because of getting dinged up. So, you bring in Samaje Perine, who's 5'9" and 230 pounds. Not quite as powerful as you might think with that stature, but he's a very good pass catcher, good pass blocker, and can run the ball well. He doesn't have much long speed at all. He doesn't have much middle speed at all either. But he's definitely a professional running back, and probably, I think he'll be flex worthy most weeks once they get settled into their groove.
Yeah, I mean, where he excelled even last year at Denver is red zone, 2-minute drill, pass heavy situations because he's a good blocker and can slip out and catch the ball. So well there. The Trent Williams deal is done. So 49ers got both of their kind of hold-in players under contract. Feeling better about them?
I definitely am feeling better about that. So
I like how they said he signed his extension and might be available to play next Monday. He's playing.
Yeah, I'm probably more excited about the Trent Williams signing than I am the Brandon Ayuk signing, because let's face it, they've got Debo, they've got McCaffrey, they've got Kittle. They can take a little hit at the skill position. Now they can't afford to not have Williams out there at left tackle.
So that really just leaves Jamar Chase, who's kind of trying to get a new contract, and Hassan Reddick, who has never reported for the Jets, as the kind of problem players left. So that'll bear some watching, especially for the Jets. Well, today we are going to do our fearless predictions. We'll start with some year-end award predictions, then we'll do our playoff predictions, and then we are going to preview Thursday Night Football. So let's dive in with awards. Looking at 5 different categories, kind of the bigger offensive categories, or might be fantasy relevant categories. First one, NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. I went with Caleb Williams. I think he's going to have a great year with the Bears. Dennis, who did you go with?
So I felt like Caleb Williams is the low-hanging fruit, and I saw that you took him. He's a quarterback, and these things tend to skew towards quarterbacks. And so I wanted to be a little bit different. We've been talking about the prospect of Kyler Murray having his first 1,000-yard season. And so I went with Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's going to start the year off a little bit slower than expected. In part because they're going to double him until McBride or Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch take the pressure off him, where they feel they can't double him on every single play. But Mike Clay has him set up for, 129 targets, 82 catches, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And that's wide receiver 14. I think Clay is pretty conservative in his projections. So I don't mind that as a starting point. I think Marv will definitely, tick up in some of that. I think getting Zay Jones back, we saw last year how having Zay Jones around made Christian Kirk so much more effective and Calvin Ridley so much more effective. And I think Jones can kind of bring that same type of, lunch pail attitude to Arizona. So, I expect him to start a little bit slower because he's going to get double covered while he kind of earns his way. As other people produce, it'll ease up on him, and then he'll start to produce. And I think going down the stretch, he'll end up with, a better year. I think he finishes as a wide receiver 1. Clay had him slated for 15 games. I'm going to bet he plays all 17 and finishes as a top 12 wide receiver. So I'm going with Marvin Harrison Jr. as the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, I tied a lot of my picks to, as you'll see, my postseason playoff predictions. For NFL Comeback Player of the Year, you and I have both went the same route, and I thought this one felt pretty obvious. And then I saw somebody picked Joe Burrow, and that gave me pause because I hadn't thought about him as being eligible. But you and I went with Aaron Rodgers. Only played 4 snaps before season ended last year. If he comes back and even puts up the what was kind of subpar year for him, numbers that he did in 2022, that would be by far better than anything the Jets have had recently, and would definitely, I think, put him in easy territory for this award.
Yeah, he's not the quarterback he was 5-7 years ago. He has a tendency to throw the ball away a lot, to avoid interceptions. So his efficiency numbers, or touchdown to interception ratio, sometimes looks good because he'll be a bit conservative with that. But I mean, he's got one of the best wide receivers in the game right now in Garrett Wilson. And Tyler Conklin is a steady tight end. He doesn't have a long history of using tight ends much, but he's got one. Mike Williams on the other side. So for the 8 games Mike Williams plays, we know what he can do. He's a big, deep threat, can go up and get the ball. He's injured Mike Evans is what Mike Williams is. They've got I forget who is it they got in the slot.
I mean, they have Lazard. They also have Malachi Corley.
They have somebody else that's manning the slot that I forget who it is.
Alan Lazard was the one I think I saw listed on their depth chart.
Yeah. Let me look real quick. I was looking at our lads. Oops, not that. Which may not be terribly up to date, but
I don't think it is. Speaking of depth charts, did you see Washington put out their depth chart and Luke McCaffrey is listed as their wide receiver too?
I didn't see him as wide receiver too. I saw him listed as the starter in the slot.
I don't think it was the slot. I think it's outside.
Xavier Gibson, that's the guy. He flashed a lot on special teams. I think he's pretty dynamic in the slot for the Jets. We'll see what happens there. You said Washington. Let's see. Yeah, our lads has McCaffrey is the second, has him behind De'Ami Brown on the outside with Olamide Zaccheaus in the slot.
And the actual Commanders depth chart they released today has it the other way around now, which I thought was fascinating. But wide receivers are a good segue. Both of us went with the wide receiver for Offensive Player of the Year. I'll let you give yours first.
So when we get to our playoff predictions, it's going to be interesting just because of the direction we went with them. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy that wanted to play more on the outside, but the truth is he's so much more effective on the inside, and he's just going to get so much volume from Jared Goff. Laporte is going to get his. I think Gibbs and Montgomery will get theirs. Most of it on the ground, with Gibbs getting a pretty heavy share through the air. But Jameson Williams still has to establish himself. Khalif Raymond is the other wide receiver in Detroit. I know they signed Allen Robinson and Tim Patrick as to the practice squad, and I fully expect Patrick to take over that other outside spot at some point. But I just think Amon-Ra's volume is going to be so large. I think we're looking at a 15-plus 100-yard or 1,500-yard season with double-digit touchdowns. I think he's just going to be so good that he's going to be one of the players that propel them to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I went with Tyreek Hill. We'll see when we go to playoffs. I'm a little more bullish on the Dolphins this year than I was last year. Tyreek Hill has talked about for a couple of years wanting to get to that 2,000-yard mark, and he was on pace for it for a while until kind of an injury late knocked him off of it and didn't end up finishing in that range. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes for it again. And I just think he's incredibly explosive in that offense. So that's who I went with.
Well, Tyreek Hill, he kind of went the Ohio State wide receiver group route as it relates to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Hill has been talking up Waddle as the guy, the wide receiver one there, and all of that. It's probably, playing 3-card Monty, trying to create a distraction. But, we've seen Waddle be super productive. So who knows? I don't think Tyreek Hill is a bad choice by any stretch of the imagination.
Next up, NFL MVP. Who did you go with?
So MVP, I think back to my my sports fandom. I'm a fan of Detroit teams. I've adopted some Ohio teams as I've lived in Ohio for a long time now. But I've always liked teams that are dominant and sports performances that are dominant. Like, I love Tiger Woods' run. I thought that was fantastic because I love when somebody is just so dominant. As a Pistons fan, I love the Bad Boys and how dominant they were. But even being a Pistons fan, I really appreciated Jordan's Bulls, and what they did for all of those championships. That was just, you just can't take that away. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan. There's been no dynasties there by any stretch, but I enjoy watching the Yankees when they have those long stretches of excellence and winning a bunch of World Series. And with Kansas City coming off 2 straight Super Bowl wins and going for a third this year, I'm betting on Patrick Mahomes to get them back to the Super Bowl. And so I'm taking Patrick Mahomes as my MVP.
I went a little bit different, maybe a little more sentimental. I went with Jared Goff in the Detroit Lions. As we progress, I have some high hopes for the Lions. I think Goff is kind of an overlooked guy a lot of times, but on a young team that's come together and seems to be moving in the right direction, he's that veteran glue. I think back to that trade, for Matthew Stafford, he almost felt like a throw-in at the time, and he has perhaps become their most important player. Just because of what he brought. And that started even that first year when the Lions weren't always great. He was kind of a steady and great presence. And I admire him, and I think hopefully he will have a great season. When it got to Coach of the Year, you and I were on the same page. We both went with Dan Campbell. So what are you excited about with the Lions?
So I freely admit, was not a fan of the Dan Campbell hire. I just felt like it was too college, too rah-rah, too over the top, that I didn't feel like it would land with NFL players making millions and millions of dollars. I didn't feel like that was going to work. I was wrong. Campbell has these guys bought into his system. He's got the assistant coaches bought in to where they're turning down opportunities to be head coaches because they want to go win with Dan Campbell. They want to go win with this Detroit Lions team. And I just think that Campbell learns from the mistakes he made. He had some blunders last year. They'd have been in the Super Bowl if it wasn't for him. He was the guy that made the mistake that kept them out of the Super Bowl, in my estimation. But we see that with coaches a lot of times when they're the further you go in the playoffs, the brighter the lights get, the stronger the microscope gets, the pressure gets more and more. And we see people have to lose before they can win. So I think Campbell takes the Lions. They win their division. And I just think it's a situation where they've learned, the team, we were 0-16 or 0-17 not too long ago. And the culture of that team has been turned around by Dan Campbell. How many years will it last? I don't know, but I'm going to ride the wave.
Yep. So those are our kind of award predictions. So let's move over. We're going to talk playoff predictions. And Dennis and I have been giving our feelings about these teams as we've been going through and doing team previews. But we started the first of those team previews way back in June. And it has been a long 3 months. We both continued tinkering, looking at things, going over scenarios. So these are going to be our final playoff predictions. Then we will give you conference championship predictions and Super Bowl predictions. So we'll start with the NFC field, and I will give you my 7 teams first. I have the Detroit Lions winning the NFC North, the San Francisco 49ers winning the NFC West, the Philadelphia Eagles winning the NFC East, the Atlanta Falcons behind Kirk Cousins winning the NFC South, and then my wild cards, I have the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, one of the teams that I've kind of come around on probably in the last month, and then the Los Angeles Rams. So, Dennis, who do you have as your 7 teams in the NFC playoff field?
So I start off at the top, just like you with the 49ers. I think they're the team to beat in the NFC. And now that they've got Ayuk and Williams back in the fold, we'll see what happens with, they had a couple defensive players injured towards the end of last year. Are they going to make it back? They seem to be reloading, not rebuilding year after year after year now. And Brock Purdy seems to be the perfect guy to execute the Kyle Shanahan offense. And who wouldn't want to execute that offense when you've got McCaffrey, Samuel, Ayuk, and Kittle, as your wheels. Purdy's the steering wheel, and they're the Firestones out there on the edges there. It's a great team right now, and I think they're due to continue to make a good playoff run. I got the Cowboys winning the NFC East. I think their defense is pretty good. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot. I feel like there's going to be a little bit of regression from the Eagles. I think they're going to miss Jason Kelce more than they think. That's, aside from being probably the best center in the game, I think he's the heart and soul of that team over the last few seasons. And you don't just replace that. That's something that takes some time to get to. So I got the Cowboys winning the East. I got the Lions coming out of the North. We've talked about them a lot. I think they're going to have a fantastic year. And the Buccaneers out of the South, the South could go any way at all. Maybe it's Cousins and he leapfrogs over the Buccaneers. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the Saints or the Panthers, but you never know when you've got a last place schedule or a third place schedule. Sometimes you're picking up some easy wins and you put yourself in a position to have success. My wild card teams, I've got the Eagles coming out of the East. Well, I think they regress some. I still think they're a very good team across the board on both sides of the ball. And while they do end up missing Kelce, I do think that, the duo of A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith paired with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts is going to be enough on the offensive side of the ball to get them into the playoffs. Second wild card is the Packers. I just think the Packers are a better team than the Bears. I think it's going to show throughout the season. I like that the way Jordan Love has matured. I'm expecting a good season out of Christian Watson. To me, this is the year you want to have Christian Watson in redraft. And if you have him in Dynasty, this is the year you want him. And as soon as the season ends, you want to trade him. I think that, once he has a great year, it's going to be like, get out of the Christian Watson business. There's hamstrings are going to flare up again. I just sense that it's going to have a good year, but it'll be inconsistent over the course of his career. And then, like you, I have the Rams as my final NFC team. And Sean McVay is a very good coach. I think that Kyron Williams and Blake Corum will make a nice backfield. I think Corum gets a lot more work than we may have expected a couple months ago. Then you've got Puka and Cooper Kupp, and they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. I expect both of them to get 100, 110, 120. Maybe I expect them to be within 15 or 20 targets of each other if they both play the same amount of games. But because there's two of them, I think you end up with them being capped on what their numbers are. Mike Clay has them about 16 targets apart with 138 and 118, with the Demarcus Robinson still having 88 targets. It's 534 attempts for Matthew Stafford, so that's a good amount.
So in the NFC, we're pretty close. Our big difference is you went with the Buccaneers and I went with the Falcons for winning the NFC South. And then I've really come off the Cowboys lately. You still have them winning the East. I have the Chicago Bears getting in as a wild card instead of Dallas. So let's swing over to the AFC, and I'll let you kick it off this time. What are your 7 teams in the AFC?
So I've got the Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson-led Baltimore Ravens playing with that pretty good defense. And, Jim Harbaugh is a guy that does what he needs to do to win. And I think their year 2 in the Todd Monken offense, I think there'll be a little more volume in the passing game. But, I mean, when you have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, like, how much passing do you really want to do? Mark Andrews is going to be great. They did pay Rashad Bateman for some odd reason this offseason. Zay Flowers is really the wide receiver you want there, but I think he's probably a wide receiver 3, maybe with some wide receiver 2 weeks. I got the Bills coming out of the East. That's probably my scariest pick because of the way they've remade their receiving core. And their defense, they've replaced several starters on their defense. But I believe in Josh Allen enough, and I think Sean McDermott has shown he's a pretty good coach. So we'll see how Joe Brady does with the offense. I know they went a little more run-heavy last year after he took over from Dorsey. I'm going to ride the Bills and see where it gets us. I've got the Chiefs coming out of the West. Like I said, I love dynasties, and I expect the Chiefs. The only thing that keeps me from having the Chiefs as the number 1 seed is that it feels like they're playing for the playoffs. They're not concerned whether they're the 1st seed or the 4th seed. I don't think they want to be a wild card, but I think they're okay being the 3rd or 4th seed because they're just like, let's get in. We'll take care of business once we get there. I've got the Texans coming out of the South. There is some concern that C.J. Stroud has a sophomore slump. We've seen players have sophomore slumps in the past, but I think the way they've structured the team around him, they've got a pretty good offensive line. They drafted a center last year that ended up getting injured early, missing most of the year. He's back this year and ready to anchor there. And Juice Scruggs with Laramie Tunsil at left tackle and Titus Howard at right tackle. They've got 2 very good tackles. They're solid at tight end with Dalton Schultz. And by adding Stephon Diggs to Nico Collins and Tank Dell and bringing in Joe Mixon, who fits what that offense does in the run game to a T. And then Cam Akers, I expect Cam Akers to move up to the RB2 slot. He as poor as Cam Akers' vision is, he runs better in that zone scheme than Dameon Pierce, who cannot see the hole to save his life. But they've got a ton of weapons, and they've got some players on defense that they're building. So I've got Texans coming out of the South. And then my wild card teams, I got the Browns coming out of the Central. I think the Central is going to be very competitive, and they've got some teams that are going to, fight it out with each other. And this one makes me a little bit nervous too, because we haven't seen it from Watson since he's returned. And with Nick Chubb out, we're relying on Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, and Dante Foreman in the backfield. But they do have Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, and David Njoku, who are good but questionable sometimes. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I've got the Dolphins as my second wild card. I just think they're an exciting team. They're going to be that offense with that speed. If they stay healthy, they can put up a bajillion points this year. And I got the Bengals making it as my final wild card. They're playing a last place schedule after last year. I think they're going to get some easy wins. I'm going to say it now. I'm not concerned about Jamar Chase yet. I think he's going to be back. I'm not too worried about it. But you've got Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Chase Brown adding some pop from the tight end position, a decent defense, and with Burrow, he could be a 50 touchdown guy.
I mean, you probably say that too as somebody that grabbed Jamar Chase in the second round of our league draft. Really needs him to come through.
Maybe.
My 7 for the AFC, I have the Houston Texans winning the AFC South. Then the Miami Dolphins winning the AFC East. I actually have 3 teams total coming out of the East, with the Dolphins narrowly edging there. I have the Cincinnati Bengals winning the AFC North. We always see at least one team that goes from technically worst to first in their division, and that one is almost a little bit of a cheat because they won 9 games last year, but they were technically fourth. And then I have the Kansas City Chiefs winning the AFC West, which to me went from being arguably the strongest division in the AFC and perhaps the NFL to being probably the easiest. My wild cards, I have the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and the New York Jets. I do think that they will find a way to win enough games to get in with a healthier Aaron Rodgers. They won 7 games last year with pretty pitiful quarterback play. So going to 10 or 11 wins isn't a huge leap with what would be substantially the best quarterback play they've had in years. Let's move to our picks for the championship games. We'll start with the NFC. I will go with mine first. I have the Detroit Lions over the Philadelphia Eagles. I actually do like the Eagles to be a little bit better this year. A couple of things. The NFC East has not had a repeat champion, I think, in quite some time. I know they were in the Cowboys technically were the NFC East champions last year, so Philadelphia winning would be a different team. I liked the addition of Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore to take over the coordinator positions, and adding Saquon Barkley, I think, gives them a new dimension. And I have mentioned my love for Detroit, so I have the Lions over the Eagles. Dennis, who do you have in the NFC Championship game?
I have the Lions over the 49ers. Like I said, sometimes you got to get to the game and learn how to win. I think last year the Lions came up short on a Dan Campbell.
Gamble,
yeah. Error in judgment. I think that the Lions have a very good team. I think they'll pull it off this year against the 49ers. It's going to be close. The Niners have a fantastic team, but we saw 2 years ago the Lions invested a lot in their offense and a little bit in their defense. Last year they invested a lot in their defense, and so now they've been building up these positions, getting higher quality talent. Bringing in guys like Brian Branch and Terrion Arnold. And Enos Rakestraw and Jack Campbell, Aiden Hutchinson, So they're putting defensive playmakers in place to be able to go against teams like the 49ers. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. I'm betting on Kyle Shanahan, and down the stretch like Campbell last year.
So let's move over to the AFC Championship game. Why don't you give us your AFC Championship matchup first?
So I'm going to stick with my dynasty narrative. I got the Chiefs going in over the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow is just one of these guys I think sometimes can will his team to victory. And I think they build up enough momentum during the season, beating up on some poor teams when they get into the playoffs that they're going to be able to make plays. But in the end, they go up against a Chiefs team that is just a team of destiny that's going to do something no other team has done. And I'm just going to ride that. The Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. We talk about Mahomes being maybe the best quarterback ever in the NFL. I think Kelsey's going to be back doing Travis Kelce stuff. I think Rashee Rice is going to put up a high-end wide receiver 2 season, even though he's got some help on the outside in Xavier Worthy and maybe Hollywood Brown if he ever gets healthy. We got good running game with Pacheco and Samaje Perine. But one thing the Chiefs have done over the last couple of years is they have put impact players on their defense around Chris Jones. And they've got guys who can make plays over there. And they play tough on defense. And so as much as I love the Bengals and Joe Burrow, I'm going Chiefs over the Bengals.
So for me, my AFC matchup, I went with a couple of teams that are, I think, younger ascending teams that made the playoffs last year, but didn't have the kind of level of success that they wanted to have, that spent this offseason trying to improve and add to their team on offense and defense. And so I have the Houston Texans over the Miami Dolphins. And, you know, the Dolphins' whole mantra this offseason has been not just to get to the playoffs, but to win a playoff game, which is something they haven't done since the 90s when Marino was there. I think they will get there and get it done this year. I don't have them going all the way to the Super Bowl. Conversely, I love what Houston did last year, and I love the offseason that they've had. You know, they've added weapons in the passing game. They've added in the running game. They've added pieces on defense. I really like their coaching staff. So I went in on them. So your Super Bowl is Lions Chiefs. Mine is Lions Texans. Who do you have winning it all?
Well, I hope you're right. But I have the Chiefs. I'm sticking with my dynasty story. I think it's going to right itself as they play the year and they get to the playoffs and they make that run to the playoffs on the arm of Patrick Mahomes, cementing his legacy as the best ever, winning 3 Super Bowls in a row.
And I went with the Lions winning.
I hope you're right.
You know, what a title would mean to the city of Detroit is probably hard to even fathom for those that don't live there. But, you know, we've seen some cities manage to get those elusive championships in the past, and I think it's Detroit's turn. I'm in on the Lions this year. I know you wouldn't be sad.
No, I wouldn't. Especially if it's the beginning of a new dynasty.
Well, to get there, we are going to have to play a lot of regular season football, and that kicks off on Thursday night with the NFL kickoff game, a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game as the Baltimore Ravens head to Kansas City to battle the Kansas City Chiefs. Dennis, we have seen 18 different Super Bowl champions host the NFL kickoff game over the last 2 decades. They have a record of 13-5. However, the last 2 years in a row, the reigning champion has lost. The Bills took the Rams out in 22, 31-10. And last year, one pride, the Detroit Lions took out the Kansas City Chiefs at home 21-20. So that puts a little bit of a wrinkle here if the Ravens were able to get revenge for the championship game that they were not able to win. Both these teams have had some substantial changes, especially on offense. We'll start with the Ravens. Their biggest change is bringing in a huge feature back, both in size and in stature, and that is Derrick Henry. It is his debut against a pretty decent defense on the road. What are you expecting from Derrick Henry in this game?
I think Derrick Henry is going to do Derrick Henry things. 20 carries, 90 yards, somewhere between 90 and 175 yards.
Way to pin down the range. That feels like the weather forecaster here, which tells us we're going to get between 1 and 20 inches of snow.
Right. Well, that's what it is with Henry. It's like he can get 20 carries for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns, or he can get 20 carries for 194 yards and 2 touchdowns. You just don't always know anymore with him. I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. I think having Lamar Jackson and that RPO offense, I think Jackson runs less this year. Mike Clay has Henry with 251 carries on the year. I think that's a good year. I think that part of the thing, the Ravens aren't known for being on the high end of plays run during the season. So, because they grind the clock out with the running game with Jackson and with the other running backs, Gus Edwards in the past and Mark Ingram in the past, these guys, they're happy to grind it out and take some shots. So I think they'll continue to do that with Derrick Henry. I think if you look on Fantasy Pros, they have him as RB13 in PPR for week 1. That feels a little bit low to me. I feel like he should be more of an RB1. But, who knows? We could see Lamar Jackson come out and fake it to Henry and throw the ball. Like I said earlier, they paid Rashad Bateman. They do have Nelson Aguilar as a deep threat. And Zay Jones has shown the ability to be a leading receiver on that team. So they do have some weapons, but I expect Henry to average about 18 touches a game to have a very good season.
Yeah, I have Henry right about the same place as Fantasy Pros, the top end RB2. I think partly it's these opening night games are never quite as robust as you think they're going to be on Fantasy. Plus, it is a really good matchup. I think both these teams have a lot of star players that did not see much in the way of snaps in the preseason. So there's always a little bit of rust and there's always a lot of spectacle on that first night. I think he will have a decent game, but I would not tend toward the 175 yards. For the Chiefs, they worked on building up their wide receiver core, but one of those weapons they brought in, Marquise Hollywood-Brown, has been ruled out for that game. They still have Rashee Rice, the rookie. Xavier Worthy is there. They brought back Juju. Still have Travis Kelce, who's healthy and ready to go, unlike a year ago. What are you expecting from that Chiefs passing game?
I think it's going to be status quo. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce doing what they do. Kelce not running any legitimate routes, just running out there and looking for a place nobody is and getting to it before anybody else.
I heard Taylor Swift was scripting some routes for him. So
yeah, maybe. So they'll do that. And then Rashee Rice, I think he established himself last year as the receiver in Kansas City. I think he's going to continue to do that. Justin Watson is listed as the backup to Hollywood-Brown. Not quite the same player. Watson's bigger, slower, but he produces when they put him in. He comes up big. He makes big plays. I think what will happen with that second outside receiver spot is they'll rotate Sky Moore in. Watson will start, but they'll rotate in Moore and they'll rotate in Hardman, and they may put Juju in the slot and push Rice out into that position as well. So the other wide receivers not named Rashee Rice, I think it's going to be like a smorgasbord. We know Mahomes will just throw it to whoever's open. So as long as they get open, somebody will get the ball. But I expect, the 10-plus targets for Kelsey, 7 to 10 targets for Rice. And then we'll see how Isaiah Pacheco does in the bell cow role. Is he going to be able to hold up against a pretty good Baltimore defense?
Yeah, I'm like you. I like Kelsey in this game. I like Andrews on the other side too, and I think Rice will be good. I know there's a lot of excitement about Xavier Worthy, and he might have some good moments. I think they might take 1 or 2 shots to him on opening night, but he is not a guy I would be throwing out there in week 1. With everyone healthy and every team playing, you have better options.
He's not great at tracking the ball. I mean, he's
fast, I think it's
but
going to be a growth. But there's a lot of people that are really pumped up because he went in the first round to Kansas City. We see it every year, and I'm not saying they won't take a shot or two to him. He's not a guy I'm playing this week. I think Pacheco will be okay too. I have him kind of in the RB2 range, also kind of a little bit like where you have it. I think it's going to be a fun game. I'm hoping it's a competitive game. But, these opening night games always have some surprises. So who are you picking?
Initially I picked the Chiefs, and I've been banging the drum on the dynasty. But then as I talked, I was like, yeah, but, I've got them as the 3rd seed, not the 1st seed. So that means they're going to lose some games. And I feel like they're well coached enough that when they lose games, it's not going to be against teams that they should beat. So I turned and I'm taking the Ravens on opening night. I think it's going to be it could turn into an ugly game. And if it is an ugly game, Derrick Henry is probably the guy that is the difference maker there. And Jackson with his running. Mahomes is a regular Houdini pulling rabbits out of his hat. So you always have to be cognizant of that. But I'm going to go Ravens on opening night.
So for me, I think both these teams are good, and you can make a case for either. Baltimore had some pretty good losses on defense this offseason. They lost 3 big defensive coaches, including their defensive coordinator, and they lost players at every level. That takes time to replace. I also think Kansas City does not want to lose opening night at home 2 years in a row. So I know they lost last year, but I am going with the Chiefs to pull out a victory on Thursday night. So that'll do it for us today. It's nice to actually be talking about a game that matters and doing a preview. And you know what? We're going to do it all again on Friday. We will have the full week 1 slate, starting with the Friday night matchup in Rio de Janeiro, where the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles are playing. And I'm going to be curious to see what their uniforms look like, because it was my understanding neither team is allowed to wear green. It's like, good job picking 2 teams having green as a primary color, sending them over there. I'm wondering if Philly's going to be wearing its black homes, but we'll see that. We'll make all of our picks and go over some of the big week 1 storylines. Also talk about this opening night game and see which of us starts off 1-0 on the season. Dennis, if people are still jonesing for that NFL hit and have 2 long days to fill, what can they do?
Well, go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, and give us a like and a subscribe. Leave us a rating and review. It'll make our week.
It will indeed. Well, it's great to be here. Week 1 of the NFL season about to get underway Thursday night. We will see you guys on Friday with a preview of the rest of the first week of the NFL season.